Hi, Denise Knowles. You are a therapist, a psychosexual therapist, a relationship therapist, and you've been working with abusive adults for a very long time. And you've been
Yeah.
using something called the Heart of England model. Can you, first of all, just give us a bit more background about yourself, and then tell us what the Heart of England model is?
Yeah, it is a very long time, Zach. And my background has been really very much as a relationship therapist, working with couples and individuals. Also trained as a family therapist, and then throwing in the psychosexual bit seemed to kind of bring the whole thing together. And I've been doing it, I worked it out the other day, for 33 years. So either I'm, a bit of a masochist or I really enjoy it. And I thoroughly enjoy my work. And the opportunity to help people grow and develop is always been central to who I am. And driving my passion forward for change, actually. So yeah.
What is the Heart of England model?
Heart of England model is something that David and I, over the years, and I think David and I have been working together on with this for about 27, 28 years now. And it's a model that has evolved. It started off in one guise. It's not changed an awful lot. We've tweaked it and we've remodeled it at times, and we've added to it when appropriately, when we've got new research and new learnings and things to put into it. So it's kept up with the latest, or it's kept up with what is published as the latest research and the like. And what it essentially is a model that helps abusive men and women to actually have the opportunity to change their behaviours after they've started to understand how they've arrived at that place. There's a bit of psychodynamic stuff in there, helping them look at where they've come from, what might have influenced them. It's a very therapeutic approach as opposed to a kind of punitive approach and directive. So it's a kind of 36 hours of intense therapy for each individual that takes part. And through that, over time, they actually learn how to be with one another. They learn an awful lot about themselves, and facilitating that and watching that growth and watching that change doesn't happen for everybody. Vast majority of people, though, really benefit from actually attending this little Heart of the England model.
So, what brought you to this work in particular? You
Mm.
mentioned you've had training and a lot of experience in other ways of working as a therapist, and this sounds really unique. Is it unique?
It is unique, as far as I'm aware, and I'm always open to being proved wrong on this. But as far as I'm aware, there isn't another uh, model of working, methodology of working with abusive men and women anywhere else certainly in the UK. There may be some globally that I'm not haven't heard of. And the uniqueness of it is that it is intense. It is a closed group of people. And what brought me to it was the fact that in my other work, in working with couples, it was becoming increasingly apparent that there was an awful lot of support for change for men and women. No, let me retract that. For women who were in abusive relationships and experiencing abuse, not so much for male victims of abuse. Certainly, when I first started this work, none at all. And there certainly didn't appear to be any opportunity for men, a lot of dads, who wanted to change to actually have the opportunity to do so. So that was a driver, because in my head, if we don't fix both sides of the problem, or we don't support both sides of the problem just moves somewhere else. And so it seemed a bit daft to me to not be completing that circle, to sort of, yes, here is a lot of support and help, and for you to either extricate yourself from this relationship and be safe, and well, you just go off and find somebody else to abuse. That just didn't make any sense to me. Plus the fact, I think there was, in my first marriage, there was some elements of control going on, and I really didn't want any other woman to go through, or indeed man, to go through anything that I had experienced. So not only experienced vicariously, but also personally. So when the opportunity came along to do something about this, again, it just seemed to be a little piece of work that slotted in to all the other work that I was doing, and was a piece of the jigsaw that hitherto had been missing.
So who are the people that come to Temper, and how, why do they come, and how do they come? How do they end up in these closed groups?
There are various routes that people take to come to us. Some in the early days were very much referred by social services. Social services would be involved with the family, and there wasn't anything around. It used to be that they would be referred for anger management, and that is certainly an element of the work that we do, but it's certainly not all of the work that we do. And again, I think that's something that people misunderstood about abuse. It was all about anger. We know now, and knew then, that it wasn't all about anger. There was all sorts of other ways of abusing. Just didn't understand what was driving that. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of people would find us via social services. Some people might find us through solicitors who've heard of our work. Sometimes even courts might kind of go, oh, do you know what? There's a course there. And then also people have found us because they've been told that they need to do something about their anger. And they've looked us up and found us on the internet and thought, you know, actually, yeah, before I'm pushed to do something, I'll volunteer and go and do something. So a lot of people found us voluntarily and continue to do so.
Can you just briefly describe what anger management approaches are versus a more holistic approach that you're doing?
I think you just hit the nail on the head there with the word holistic, Zach. You know, anger management focuses on anger, and it's almost as if anger is a separate emotion to all the other emotions that us as human beings experience. And so if we take it out, actually, and deal with that, then everything else is going to be fine. Oh, but it was. That's not the case. So anger management would kind of look at techniques. It would look at kind of recognizing when you're getting angry, you know, what might precipitate it, what kind of you're doing, what the behavior looks like, and then finding a way of looking at that behavior and changing it. It doesn't, in my view, approach anger as an emotion. It doesn't place it in the vast array of emotions that we as human beings all experience. And there's not a lot wrong with anger. You know, it's, in my opinion, it's an essential emotion. It's one of our primary emotions, and actually without it, we really wouldn't have survived the way we have. So it's how we regulate it. It's what we do when we're feeling angry that actually helps us do it. Anger management is just on the behavior, not on what is driving it, what's pushing it in there. So it's about being able to look at anger in the context of the whole vast array of human emotions. That's how it's different to anger management.
Thank you. You touched on this a minute ago. Can you say more about what informed you in building this Heart of England?
There's an awful lot. There's something about being able to understand myself. If I don't understand myself, if I bury an awful lot of experiences, then they can often come up and bite me in the bum at an unexpected time. Or I might have learned wonky ways of working, you know, inappropriate ways of thinking, distorted ways of thinking, of believing. I might even just be copying what I've seen going on around me and haven't been given the opportunity to consider anything different. And that came up a lot in my couples work, where the families of origin would be very different. One of the couple would have this idea, and another with this, and then that would cause some conflict, and neither of them were right and neither of them were wrong. It was just different. And somehow or another, it was about helping the couple to see that difference and accept that difference. And once they'd actually managed to do that, we were then able to address what they could do differently. But if they didn't understand how they got to this place, who they were, where all these different emotions might sit in their world, then actually they were at a bit of a loss. It was a little bit like putting a sticking plaster on something. We'll just change the way you think and then you'll be okay. But we never addressed the way they felt. And so you had to dig a little bit deeper. And so in digging that little bit deeper, some people get a better picture of them as a whole person, not just going back to the anger management thing, not as an angry person, but as a person that has anger as well as. And once they knew that they had all these other emotions and that actually they might be behaving angrily, but it would be another emotion driving it, they start to go, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's that wholeness, that's holistic. It's looking at the whole person as opposed to just a part of them. I suppose it's a little bit like what happens in the NHS. If you've got something wrong with your waterworks, you go and see a urologist. But if you've got something wrong with your waterworks and with your heart, the heart people don't talk to the urology people. They deal with their bit, and the heart people deal with their bit, and ne'er the twain shall meet. But we've all got a heart and we've all got waterworks, and we need to make sure that they're working in sync and harmony with one another. And that's a little bit where we come from. And that's what informed my approach with this work.
Yeah, that's interesting actually that you mentioned that. So the allopathic medicine treats the symptoms but not the causes often, doesn't it? And here we are, and look at how we're doing. Many of us are obese and we have systemic health problems and systemic mental health problems as well.
Absolutely. And of course, if I've grown up in a household where this is the norm, then I don't see anything untoward about carrying on that, because that's what families do. That's how individuals live. Well, if it's not healthy, then I need to do something about that. If it suits me, and if I find a partner or a family where actually I'm fitting in and nobody challenges it, then there's no need for me to change. When you meet somebody or you get into a family where it's a bit different, and it's not accepting, that's where all of this stuff can bubble up and go, well, hang on a minute, what's your problem with me? I'm all right. And so it's about helping the individual see that maybe there are many parts of them that are all right, and there are some parts of them that could be even better.
And this comes to a head often when children are involved, doesn't it? Because as parents, we tend to have a very strong view on what we'd like for our child, and it might not be aligned with the other parent. And if we and we're not seeing eye to eye, this can really go south very quickly.
Yeah, and there's a few things that come out from that, Zach. One is that it can create conflict, my way or the highway type conflict. My way's right, didn't do me any harm, and I was, look at me, I'm a successful, happy human being. So your way has to be not right. It's very black and white in the thinking. Some people, though, can grow up in households where they've experienced quite a bit of difficulty and perhaps even trauma, and they are absolutely not wanting that for their own children. And so if they see anything that might even tickle up that trauma, they're onto it. And actually it's about being able to scale it, what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. So, and children are often caught in the middle. And you asked earlier on about, kind of what drives me to work in this way. Actually, the children do. More often than not, the children are caught up in the middle of something that they're total innocence in. And it's about breaking that cycle. It's about actually saying to these children, there are a different way. You don't have to be living in this. of course, it's also helping the parents to see that they mustn't weaponize the children either. And that happens an awful lot. And that's often where emotions are aroused. And when my emotions are aroused, I may well behave in a way that is not totally appropriate. So how can I manage those emotions that have been brought up in me that may have a very long tail back to my childhood, and so I never learned how to manage them? As a grown-up and as an adult, now I need to learn. So it's not it's not, yes, let's do this and everything will be all right. It's let's look at this in the context of the whole of your family system.
Can we get into the 8-point the 8 primary emotions wheel? And this is a really big piece of the Heart of England approach, and it's simple enough to resonate with people who've got no experience of psychology or therapy or any of this stuff. Yeah, so talk us through this.
This is just as you said, Zach, a very simple. It has to be simple for me to get my head around this. Easily approachable, and for most people, easily understood. And I think those are the things that are really important, that it's approachable and that it's understandable, because if it's not, then people are not going to make any use of it and not going to learn from it. And it's something that, again, David and myself put together over a period of time. It's looking at these 8, we refer to them as primary, some people would refer to them as declarative emotions. And some people will actually question the things around whether or not trust is an emotion. Coming from my couple counselling background, the trust is absolutely essential in couple relationships. And it's not just about trusting one another, it's about an individual being able to trust themselves. So take responsibility and be accountable for themselves as well. So what we've got here, trust and disgust. Some people might say disgust is an extension of distrust. And for most couple relationships, most family relationships, that's a real pivotal one. Again, in my couple counselling work, a lot of people will say, if I can't trust him or I can't trust her, then there is no relationship. And we're not born with trust. We kind of acquire it. We learn about it. And if we are brought up in a nice, safe environment, then we can develop a feeling of safety and security. And trust is an awful lot to do with attachment, and John Bowlby's theories around attachment. And thank goodness, we now know that it's not fixed. So if I grow up in a less than safe environment and perhaps don't feel so secure, it doesn't mean that I can't develop security in my relationships and in myself later on, which is superb. Equally, though, it does mean that if I grew up in a nice, safe environment, I can, in relationship terms, begin to actually find myself in a relationship that I don't trust. I don't trust myself, and I perhaps don't trust my partner. And the one thing that I will say to people, not only in temper, but also in my other work, is that you can't trust anybody or anything 100% of the time. And I think unrealistically, that's what an awful lot of people are aiming for. And I do use the example that I trust my husband, Tom, 100% to not hurt me at all. I trust him 100% to be there for our children completely. Can I trust him to remember to take his medication? Can I trust him to put the bins out? Can I trust him with the washing machine? Not at all. So there are areas in my life where trust is absolute, and areas in my life where it's pretty much not inexistent, but it's not a place of disgust with it. So we have to understand what we mean about trust. And the lovely Brené Brown has done some fantastic work on breaking trust down into component parts. And that helps us to also help the people that join us to understand about boundaries, about being reliable, about being accountable, about holding confidences, so I can share my vulnerabilities with you, and I know that you're not going to sort of trample all over them or tell the world about them and give ammunition to others, or indeed not use them as ammunition against me at some time. It helps me to understand that sometimes I have to take a very difficult route rather than an easy route. And it also helps me to be generous and maybe less judgmental. So it's one of those things that if I can trust myself, then I can actually also begin to start to be able to empathize with others. And the people that come along to the courses actually perhaps have not been able to trust themselves or not developed that, and or they are really struggling to trust their partners or people around them or the world, even authorities that might be involved with them. So it's a massive thing when it comes to part of the emotions. When it's not there, people wobble. We'll often say it's a little bit like the North Star. So the trust at the North Point, if you like, when we can see it and we're facing in the same direction, we can pretty much navigate our way around our world, our internal world and the external world. If we can't see it, then we might fall down towards the disgust or the distrust. But often what takes over is the anger and the fear, that continuum there. And going back, just picking up on what I was saying earlier on, Zach, about anger often getting a bad press. Often people behave angrily, but it's not necessarily anger that's driving that behavior. So this helps people to kind of explore a little more that maybe they are just so frightened about something that they're actually being angry. Maybe they are so scared they're being angry. Maybe they are feeling so sad and upset that they can't be sad and upset because that shows a vulnerability, as does fear. So they display anger. And maybe, and it's something that they just don't understand. You know, their curiosity isn't sated. So they actually get angry. So we have this little model just starts to help people understand where anger might be in their world. It might be that they aren't displaying anger and people see them being angry. What's driving it is an internal emotion that they're not able to express, or perhaps they even haven't identified for themselves. So when that continuum takes over from the trust discussed one, then that's where we see an awful lot of conflict in couple relationships, in family relationships, because one is very angry, one is often very fearful, and then they can flip. When I've been frightened enough, I might just get angry. And when I've been angry enough, I might just get frightened. So there is that flip going on all the time. And of course, when that's happening, trust is getting further and further and further away because neither feels safe. Then we've got joy and grief, sadness and loss, if you like. And of course, one of the things about that is a lot of people don't like being around sad people. They think it's a bit contagious, a little bit like anger. You know, oh dear, this is a bit boring. Oh dear, better not get involved here. It's again part and parcel of who we are. It has to be balanced. We have to have a balance of these emotions. We can't always be yay. Even those that are kind of out there going, yeah, life's great, we're fantastic. Behind closed doors, we may have a few moments of sadness and upset, you know, and a lot of our amazing comedians actually will report feeling very sad and very and sometimes quite lonely as well. So again, what we see is not always what is driving people's behavior. There may be other things going on. And then just picking up on the curiosity and shock. Curiosity is where we grow. If we're not interested, if we're not wanting to learn, then actually we can be just a bit dead, really. You know, we just be fed everything, believe everything, that we don't question it, and so we don't actually develop. Sometimes we can be too curious, and if someone is kind of, well, so what was that about? Where's that going from? What are you going to do? We can feel that we're being got at, and that then sometimes can cause us to feel a little bit angry, maybe. And if we display that anger, then what we've got is a partner or other people, maybe either in fear or indeed in shock. Sometimes I can be so curious and then I find something out that I go, oh, wasn't expecting that. And then what happens is that I might freeze for a little while. So if we look at shock and think of it as being our freeze response, one of our 3 survival mechanisms, and fear as being our flight response and anger as our fight response, we begin to see how essential it is to have these emotions, because without them, as I say, we probably wouldn't have survived this far. The other thing about this wheel is that these emotions can flip, and we see it a lot with children. They can be playing and having a hysterical time, the greatest fun of all, and then one of them will fall over, or one won't share a toy, or one kind of has eaten the last sweet in the packet, and they start to feel a bit sad, upset, hurt. And then what we do is we kind of go, there, let's see that, let's clean up the wound, let's see what's going on. And slowly they can begin to gain their equilibrium again. Equally, we can actually be very, very sad. And as I say, nobody really likes being around sad people. And what I will often say is, if you're at a funeral, it's very difficult. You've lost somebody, a loved one. There's a lot of sadness. And it's not long before people start cracking jokes, because it's too difficult to be down there. So they'll remember fondly the person, and they'll remember the joyous times. One other thing just to say about this wheel, and then I'll shut up and you can ask me questions if you so wish, is that if we look at curiosity and joy, they are the emotions that are supporting trust in our model. Okay. And of course, when you first meet somebody, that's what you are. You're very interested in somebody. You're very interested when you take up a new hobby. You're very interested. It brings you a lot of fun. You have joy. And so you begin to be able to trust in your abilities to take up the hobby or enjoy the person's company. And we would hope that that's how the rest of our lives would be together. We have these other emotions lurking underneath, and they're always there. If they don't get acknowledged, they're a little bit like a toddler that kind of, come on, pay attention to me. I'm here. Remember me. Don't forget about me. When are we going to do this? When are you going to attend to me? So lots of people will look at anger, fear, grief, shock and disgust as being very negative. I'm going to share that around and go, they're not negative. They're just jolly uncomfortable, and nobody likes to be uncomfortable. So we want to focus in on the trust, the curiosity and the joy. I would invite people to think about curiosity, including the less comfortable feelings.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was a really concise description.
One thing, Zach, I didn't say about that wheel is that although I talked about them flipping, they can also move around the outside. So if I think about going to the disgust bit, you know, if I've fallen down that far, or even if I'm frightened or I'm shocked, when I start, let's take shock, when I start to thaw out, if you like, when I start to unfreeze, I'm not immediately going to be shooting up necessarily to being curious, oh, what was all that about? I might actually be a bit scared. I might be a little bit disgusted. So I could actually start to work around the outside of that wheel as well. And for us, the way we will use this in temper is that if we take the center bit as being a place of homeostasis where we can manage and regulate these emotions on a regular basis, fantastic. And if we take the outer rim of the circle as being, let's say, 10, it's about recognizing that there will be steps out to that. And so one of the things that we do is help people to scale what's going on for them and recognize that the language that they might use is also an indicator, but also what's going on inside them. There may be messages coming from inside them, like fluttery heart, tingly tummy, tingly toes, sweaty palms. There could be all sorts of things that they haven't had their attention drawn to, that is an indicator that something is going on inside them. And the wheel helps them to, sounds like Michael McIntyre, the wheel helps them to kind of place themselves and understand what emotion may be in play. And then actually, is this happening now, or is this an echo from the past? And then I can actually do something about it in the now.
Used this model for so long. You said 27 or 28 years. What's your experience of the outcomes?
It's interesting because, as I said earlier on, we've tweaked it. We've moved things around in the as things have changed, and as the course material changes, as the people that are on the course, their requirements, we will work with their requirements. We'll fit everything in. And we used to introduce this wheel maybe a little bit later on in day one, beginning of day two. What we've found is that if we introduce it quite early on, it starts to help people position themselves. They kind of immediately can go, wow, yeah, I can see that. So then all the talk scenarios we have, they're able to go, actually, do you know, yeah, that was a really enjoyable time. And there was a little bit of this going on as well. So they're given a vocabulary, they're given a guide straight away. And so that has made the outcomes very much more successful, I would say, because they're able now to be able to position themselves in such a way that they go, right, yeah. And for a lot of the people that come on the course, their outcomes, many of them will come because they would like to have their children have access to them, you know, and so they have to prove themselves, evidence that they're able to do this. They can start to see those emotions going on in their own children as well. So again, that ability, and their partners, so that empathy is there. The outcome is about them being able to have a greater understanding of themselves and move closer to what it is that they would like to have, which is for the vast majority, is for them to have a very much more harmonious relationship, not just with partners, with children, but even with colleagues. And I've seen this diagram actually helping people to outside of relationships to connect a little bit more with what's going on in other people too, to question it, to use their curiosity.
So you said earlier that you're not aware of any approach like this being used either in the UK or elsewhere. And you've been doing this for decades, nearly 30 years. And it sounds like this emotional wheel really resonates with people because it's simple and visual, isn't it? It's the pleasant and the unpleasant and the holistic global human experience all captured in one simple image. Yeah. And you've got the polarities, all these different axes. So you've got a sense that it resonates with people, but how do we know it's working? So how do we know the outcomes are going well for these people that come on the course and then go away again?
Sadly, there's so little funding around to do any kind of proper research on this. And the other thing that I'm very aware of is that there's still a massive stigma attached to people being allegations of abuse and in some cases actual convictions for abuse. So people are a little bit reluctant to talk about it. Although that said, one of the things that we do have is people coming back to us saying, I've managed, if you like, to achieve this. The children are having contact with me now, and that's growing. The other side of it is that people have gone on perhaps to have another relationship, and it's a very different relationship. So they've actually managed to kind of leave behind this version of themselves and gone into another relationship that is working for them. I see all of those as being positive outcomes. They're anecdotal, for sure. It would be absolutely amazing if somebody could come along with copious quantities of funding and sort of do a proper research on it. The thing with anything like this, and as a sex therapist, I take an awful lot of sex therapy not sex therapy, sexual surveys with a bit of a pinch of salt, because again, oh yeah, we can do that. Yeah. Well, actually, yes, everything's wonderful. When people are still a little bit shy of saying things like this because they're worried what other people will think about them. That's a whole other area for them to then go and work on. However, in our experience, in Temper's experience, it's having those reports come back to us. It's seeing families reunited. It's seeing children playing with their dads as well as with their moms. It's children being able to witness and learn that you can fall out. Absolutely, you can fall out. You don't have to be nasty with one another. You can actually be pleasant. You can get along. You don't have to maybe like each other, but you can be respectful of one another. And for me, those outcomes might only be small drops in the ocean at the moment. We have to start somewhere. There's no way of saying, right, we're going to stop doing this because it's not worth it. If we can have 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 families, more individuals go on to enjoy their lives and be happy in a relationship, happy with themselves. You know, I've even had people saying, oh, I'm never going to have a relationship again. I don't trust myself to have a relationship. And then maybe 3, 4 years later, we might hear from them and say, oh, by the way, I just thought I'd let you know. Oh, fantastic. That's really good to hear. So it's very fulfilling, very fulfilling.
So it ripples out.
Yeah.
I think you've had somewhere in the region of 1,200 clients over the years on this course, this 36-hour intensive group course. And I think I'm right in saying the completion rate is around about 90 or 95%. And it's not an easy course to get through. I attended as a client in 2019, and I felt like I'd been run over after the first day.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
yeah, a lot of people will say they feel wrung out. that's
yeah.
for sure.
So something happens to the people on this course while they're in it that gets them to hang on. And I think it's to do with the North Star, the trust, incredible sense of trust between the clients and the facilitators, and between the clients themselves. So the people tend to come back for the second weekend a month later, even though they know they're gonna get.
Yeah, the first weekend is very much about throwing an enormous amount of ideas at people, and there's a lot of practice going on, getting people to sit down and talk and listen. I mean, really listen and learn how to feed back. We take them back through their childhood so that they start to connect with these ideas of these 8 basic primary emotions, you know, so that what was fun, what wasn't fun. And what's interesting with that is a lot of the time when we'll ask them, tell us about an exciting time, they'll sit there, they'll go, can't think of any exciting times, but I can tell you some awful times. So, you know, it's lovely because it gives us examples that we can use to demonstrate what's going on on the wheel. And they get an awful lot of other things thrown at them that they can go away and practice, at the same time learning an awful lot about themselves. So yes, they're kind of picked up and they're turned inside out, and there's all sorts of things going on. The trust, I think, helps because it's a closed group. I think the trust also is about the fact that the facilitators are not judging them. They're accepting of where they are. They're meeting them where they are actually at. Don't get me wrong. Over the years, we've had to sort of say to some people, this is maybe not the right time for you. This is maybe not going to work for you, but, you know, well done for coming and well done for trying. And some people will say themselves, actually, no, this is not for me. But 90 to 95% rock up for the second weekend, which is really tough, because that's when they actually have to start addressing the abusive behaviours that they have been either have had allegations made against them or they have actually taken part in. Many are shocked, as I was when I first started this, at what is regarded as abusive behaviour. So actually highlighting this is also useful for them. And I think that first weekend, the amount of trust that they build in each other and recognizing that actually we're not alone, I'm not alone, so you're going through this as well. There's a sense of, oh, up until this point, I really thought I was the only person. Even though we talk about this and it's highly publicized, you know, the levels of abuse in relationships, when you're in it, you actually just think you're the only one in it. And that's true of any traumatic experience. When you're experiencing it, you think you're the only one in it. Even with all this horribleness that we're seeing in the world, you know, everybody that's going to will have their own individual story.
Yes, it's disconnecting and dissociative, isn't it? It's isolating, and it's the bottom half of the wheel.
Yeah.
Do you think angry men are natural, or is this is this behavior the result of the way that adults interacted with these men when they were boys, when they were growing up?
I think there's an awful lot, and again, there's research going on, and thank the Lord, we're seeing very much more interest in. It's still slow, but we're seeing more interest in men's well-being, men's health, how we talk to our boys, what we expect of our boys. And again, if I think about it, you know, because I'm very old now, if I think about when my children were little, I did, well, both hands up here, I did treat our sons differently to our daughter. And once I kind of cottoned onto that, I thought, whoa, what's that about? And I always remember my mom going absolutely bonkers because I bought our son, our second son, a plastic yellow tea set with ladybirds on. You can't buy a boy tea set. Boys don't play with tea sets. And my dad went even more crazy when I bought the boys Action Men as they got old. Here, boys don't play with dolls, you know. And so I was aware of the impact of my upbringing, and actually I was cascading that onto my own children. And once I became aware of that, I thought, well, now hang on a minute, it's perfectly all right for boys to play with tea services. I would like them to learn how to make me a cup of tea, so let's do it that way. It's not the domain of women to make cups of tea all the time. It can be shared, and that's that's something that I think attitudinally is beginning to slowly to change. But there's a long way to go. And I think the way that boys, the expectations of boys, and the opportunities that boys have kind of shrunk, and the opportunities and the expectations of girls has actually grown. But there's still, when you see the reporting of crime, when you see the reporting of education, there is still this stereotypical idea. There's bias as well, and I think it's going to take a wee while to shake off that sort of attitudinal difference. I'm working at it.
So if men and boys feel they can't express weakness or upset, what effect does that have on them?
They go underground. You know, we know, unfortunately and very sadly, that we have the highest suicide rate in our young men and our older men. You know, it's a much lower rate for girls and men. We're beginning to see, or have begun to see, that many more boys and men are experiencing eating disorders, for example. They are experiencing masses of depression and anxiety. The adverts, if you like, encouraging them to go along and to speak to their GP, to not ignore symptoms. We still focus on big things like heart attacks and prostate cancer and cancer generally, but we're not talking about sort of the emotional side of things. It's all right to be vulnerable. And if you're not able to talk to somebody about it, if you're not able to express yourself somewhere for fear of somebody thinking you're a wuss, or worse, you're somebody that is a bit strange, then actually we are doing our gentlemen and men, that's an old-fashioned word, Denise, gentlemen, we're doing our men and our boys a massive disservice. It gets driven underground, and it comes out as very, very acute, sometimes life-threatening behaviour.
Is there much higher male prison population the result of emotional illiteracy in boys and men?
There is, again, there is. If you look at the prisoners, and if you only look at the prison numbers, they're swelling, aren't they? That actually, a lot of the things that male prisoners are often invited along to is to kind of basic reading and writing things. There's a little bit also about talking about how they are, what's going on for them. They wouldn't be asked how they're feeling. A lot of men need to be asked what they're thinking. They'll quite tell you what they're thinking. And as a therapist, if I ask a man what he's thinking, I can usually discern from that what he's feeling. And I can slowly introduce the feeling words back into the room. And then, oh yeah, I'll take that on. Yeah, okay. So it is a language thing. It's an approach thing. It's an attunement thing. If I can tune in to what's going on for the men and pick it up without going, oh, you're looking very sad. Gosh, I couldn't help but notice that you had a bit of a watery eye there. Are you all right? Have you got something in your eye, or is there something else going on? So it gives them an opportunity to get out, but it also gives them an opportunity to open up. How we approach them. And that's one of the wonderful things about the work that Temper does. It comes from a therapeutic position, not one of you're a man and this is what you've got to do or not got to do.
So the counterpoint to the therapeutic approach would be what exactly? A sort of directive, didactic, judgmental approach.
I worked for probation, I think, for 3 years as a facilitator on their integrated domestic abuse program. I know that's changed. I think it's now building better relationships, and I think the content has changed somewhat. It was very prescriptive, and it was all about what they had done. It was a little bit about it was kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It was very much more about watching over them as opposed to encouraging them to grow. It was an extension. And of course, what I also have to remember is that all the and it was only men. All the men there had been court mandated, and there was an awful lot of threat to them if they didn't attend. So you'll be back in, or you'll go into prison if you don't do this. And so that, quite punitive in that respect. So there is and I know that there is interest in sort of softening that approach, which is where building better relationships came from. However, it's still, here's a program and we're going to get through it chunk by chunk by chunk. One of the things, as I said earlier on, we've learned in Temper is we've got content, and depending on the way the dynamics in the group, we can bring it in at an appropriate point. We don't have to wait until such time. All right, no, hang on, that's 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon that we've got to talk about this. We don't turn around and say, just wait a minute, we'll get to that tomorrow. It's about, okay, that's interesting, let's pick that up now and work with it.
So in that sense, it's very person-centered and reflexive.
Yeah.
So have some men been triggered into an almost permanent angry state?
That's a really interesting question. I am not sure it's just men. I think the world at the moment is living on that fear anger axis. I really do. I think the ability to trust has you've only got to look at the media. I don't know what to believe and what not to believe, and I think the world itself is living on that fear anger continuum. before the world went bonkers, I mean, even before COVID, I suppose, hit, it was beginning to turn that way. There are going to be some men and women whose brains are wired a little bit differently, and there may be organic reasons for them to be in that angry state. I would, before I labeled anybody, and I don't like labels, before I labeled anybody angry, I think what I might be going is, so is it anger? Get my curiosity hat out. Is it fear? Is it a huge amount of sadness? Is there been a lot of trauma here that hasn't been dealt with? And their defense, and it can often be a defense, is to fight because they're terrified of somebody getting too close.
And it's worth saying that the temper course is open to men and women. It's not just
absolutely, yeah.
We've got a couple of minutes left. So one last question that you probably won't be able to answer because it's a massive, but I'm interested to see what you make of it. If you could make one change in society to make the situation better, what would it be?
Whoa. I would ask people to have an open mind and an open heart, to not immediately jump to judgment, to engage their curiosity. Not just about others, but about themselves. There are so many people that I've worked with over the years that I bump into that are very much about looking outside of themselves and quick to judge, but they don't look inside. I would always ask somebody to check out their own integrity. Do they practice what they profess? And if they don't, they need to do a bit of work.
Thank you so much, Denise.
Thank you, Zach, for the opportunity.